Zoom is getting started. I mean, the Facebook Live. Great. Let me try to pull it up on my phone. All right, we're live. I just want to see the comments. Okay, great. So let's begin. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. أنا اسمي ياسمين حسن. أنا شغالة في جمعية ياما في بروكلين نيويورك في قسم الهجرة. اليوم معنا محامي محمد سليم شغال معنا كمان في قسم الهجرة. Would you like to introduce yourself, Mohammed?
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Mohammed Salim. I'm an attorney in New York. I'm happy to join Yasmin here today for a presentation with the Yemeni American Merchants Association on an incredibly important topic for our community. So excited to talk about TPS.
Thank you, Mohammed. So today, اليوم هنحكي عن TPS. TPS كمان معروف حالة الحماية المؤقتة، بس هنكلم عنه زي TPS. فاليوم هنكلم عن كذا شيء. أول شيء هنكلم عنه ما هو TPS. تاني شيء هنكلم عنه ليش في ايش العلاقة ما بين TPS واليمن، ومن ممكن يقدم إلى TPS، من ما ينفعش يقدم إلى TPS. لو أنتوا قدمتوا على TPS يعني TPS هيساعدكم في إيش؟ ليش أنتوا المفروض تقدموا على TPS وإمتى لازم تقدموا على TPS. So today we're going to be discussing what TPS is, why was TPS extended to Yemen, who is eligible and not eligible to apply, what TPS will do for you if you are granted the status, why you should apply and when you should apply. I'm going to discuss some important deadlines today. إيش حصل على جولاي 9 2021؟ في أحد اسمه أليخاندرو شغال في الحكومة في أمريكا. قال كان عايز يخلي TPS الناس اللي هم يمنيين ممكن يبقى عندهم يقدموا على TPS، ولو جالهم TPS هيحميهم لمدة 18 شهر إلى اليمن. So on July 9th, 2021, the Secretary of Homeland Security, Alejandro Mayorkas, announced an 18-month extension and redesignation of Yemen for temporary protected status. This means to say that now Yemeni nationals can apply for TPS and be protected for up to 18 months. ما هو TPS؟ TPS شيء بيحمي الشخص اليمني وناس تانيين أيضا، بس الآن يعني بنتكلم عن اليمن واليمنيين. TPS بيحمي أي حد اللي بيقدم عليه لمدة 18 شهر وبيمنعه علشان الحكومة ما ينفعش يمشوه من البلد. في العادي TPS الحكومة بيدي TPS للناس اللي جايين من بلد لو في حرب أو في مشاكل أخرى. Temporary protected status, what is it exactly? A TPS is a temporary humanitarian form of relief that protects foreign nationals, in this case, Yemeni nationals, who are currently in the United States from being removed and sent to their home country because the government has decided that returning them will put them at risk for violence, disease, or potentially death.
Okay, so I want to add that, TPS is not just for Yemen, but Yemen is one of the countries. TPS is a program that USCIS has set up to allow people to, escape issues that are taking place in their country, humanitarian based. And we'll talk about some of those issues later. But this is a program that is created by Department of Homeland Security, USCIS, to allow people from those countries to have some sort of protections while they're here in the US. So it's really important to understand that, this is, again, temporary. It says it in it, people don't realize it's a temporary protected status. We're going to talk a little bit more later about some other things, but this does not give you permanent residence in the United States. That's what's known as a green card. And we don't know what they're going to do in the future, but I just want to emphasize that it is a temporary protected status, which means you don't get a green card just by applying for TPS, or you find yourself towards citizenship. It's just a temporary status for the time being, so that the government doesn't tell you you have to leave the country.
أهم حاجة تعرفوه عن ال TPS، ال TPS حاجة الآن مؤقتة. يعني لو أنتوا قدمتوا على TPS وجالكوا ال TPS، ما ينفعش على طول تقدموا على الجرين كارد والجنسية. ال TPS بس حاجة مؤقتة يحميكوا لمدة 18 شهر لغاية حاجة تاني يحصل وأنت ممكن تقدم على شيء تاني. فزي ما قلنا من بدري، اليمن الآن في حرب. الحرب ده شيء صعب قوي، وعلشان الحرب أمريكا حكمت الناس اللي جايين من اليمن وهم يمنيين والآن عايشين هنا في أمريكا ممكن يقدموا على TPS. في العادي لو بلد عنده حرب أو في مرض يعني وحش قوي في البلد، أو في مشاكل بالجو، مثلا تورنيدو أو هurricane أو أنواع من الأرثكويك، في العادي أمريكا بتحكم على البلاد يجي لهم TPS لو هم هنا في أمريكا. So how is a country exactly designated with TPS or redesignated with TPS? Typically, there's specific criteria that's outlined by the US Secretary of State that will allow for a country to be designated with TPS. Typically, there are 3 different temporary conditions. And the most important thing to take note of is that the conditions are temporary. If there's an ongoing armed conflict, such as civil war, which currently Yemen has been dealing with a civil war since 2014. If there are environmental disasters, such as earthquakes or hurricanes that are occurring, that also might lead to the United States deeming a country with TPS, designating them with TPS, or an epidemic of some sort. These are some examples of temporary conditions. There are others, but it typically is up to the US Secretary of State to designate a country with TPS. زي ما قلنا اليمن الآن عندهم حاجتين في البلد بيحصل. أول حاجة في مشكلة بقلة الأكل في البلد وقلة المية، وعلشان كده ده سببين علشان أمريكا حكمت الناس اليمنيين ممكن يقدموا على TPS. So since 2016, a famine has been ongoing in Yemen, which has killed more than 8,500,000 children as of 2018. This famine has pushed the United States to designate Yemen as a country where individuals can apply for TPS. And this is one of the 2 reasons as to why TPS was extended to the country. زي ما قلنا في شيء تاني علشان ليه أمريكا حكمت اليمنيين ممكن يقدموا على TPS. الحرب اللي في اليمن من ساعة 2015 موتت أكتر من 100,000 130,000 شخص في اليمن، ولسه الحرب بيحصل الآن. وعلشان كده أمريكا حكمت الناس اليمنيين ممكن يقدموا على TPS. So the civil war in Yemen has been occurring since 2015. It's still occurring right now, and it's killed over 130,000 people in the country, and it's still killing people until this very day. Given this, the United States has decided to extend TPS to the country to assist those who are currently living in the United States and help protect them temporarily for 18 months. فأيش الفرق ما بين حاجة اسمه initial designation re-designation؟ initial designation دي أول مرة ما الحكومة قال هندي TPS للناس اليمنيين اللي عايشين في البلد الآن في أمريكا. re-designation تاني مرة والثالث مرة اللي الحكومة قالوا عايزين نخلي اليمنيين اللي في أمريكا يقدموا على TPS. TPS لليمنيين مش حاجة جديدة. من سنين اليمنيين كانوا ممكن يقدموا على TPS لمدة قصيرة، والآن تقريبا تاني مرة أو ثالث مرة اليمنيين ممكن يقدموا على TPS. ففي ناس قدموا من سنين على TPS وكان عندهم الحماية لمدة 18 شهر، وبعد كده يعني خلص الحماية والآن ممكن يقدموا تاني. في ناس لسه جاءوا أمريكا قريب وهم يمنيين وعايزين يقدموا على TPS أول مرة. فالفرق ما بين ده وده هو مين قدم أول مرة ومين قدم تاني مرة أو تالت مرة.
Okay, so Yasmin, if you want, I can speak a little bit more about the designation versus the initial designation, re-designation versus the initial designation. Did you get a chance to finish the rest of it in Arabic?
Yeah.
Okay. So last couple of months ago, we did the last webinar that we did. We were talking about why it's something that's going to be probable for this government to do an initial designation of TPS for Yemeni clients. Now, under Trump, the Biden administration, they just did a re-designation. You know, Obama basically started the TPS for Yemen, you know, in his last month before he left office in January of 2017. Under Trump, the only thing the Trump administration did was to give a re-designation. A re-designation allows people who got TPS to continue to stay here and get their status extended. However, it did not allow people that missed the chance the first time around. This time around, we want to make sure all of our Yemeni community members realize that if they didn't get to do it the first time for whatever reason, you know, whether they were given the wrong advice or they messed up on the forms or they didn't know about it, there should be no reason why they shouldn't apply for TPS. If they're a Yemeni national and they're here and they don't have any legal status, or if they don't have a green card, they should apply for TPS. You know, this is very, very important because this is something that the administration did this time around that they didn't do the last time. And by administration, meaning, you know, the president and the offices that are run by it. So we want to make sure that everybody who does not have any sort of legal status that's a Yemeni national should be covered either by re-designation or through initial designation, meaning first time to apply for TPS.
فالآن لو أي شخص قدم على TPS من سنين ويعني رفضوا أو ما جالوش الفرصة يقدم من سنين، الآن أنت عندكم الفرصة تقدموا تاني. احنا اهم حاجة لينا نخلي كل اليمنيين اللي الآن عايشين في امريكا يقدموا على TPS. TPS حاجة شيء مهم قوي للشباب اليمنيين، ولو انت ما عندكش جرين كارد او ما عندكش الجنسية او الفيزا بتاعتك هينتهي قريب، إلا لو قدمت على TPS عندك حماية لمدة 18 شهر. يعني ممكن تعمل أشياء كتيرة قوي في 18 شهر. فمين ممكن يقدم على TPS؟ في العادي لا، حسب البلد. في بلاد كتير عندهم TPS، بس اليوم أهم حاجة لينا بنتكلم على اليمنيين. لازم أنت شخص اتولدت في اليمن والآن عايش في أمريكا هنا، ولازم تبقى كنت عايش في أمريكا من شهر اللي فات يوم 5/2021. لازم يعني لو أنت سافرت من اليمن وجيت أمريكا من أسبوع ما ينفعش تقدم على TPS. لازم تبقى عايش هنا قبل أو على اليوم شهر اللي فات يوم 5/2021. ولازم تبين اللي أنت هتقعد في البلد. ما ينفعش مثلا يجيلك TPS وتسافر لمدة سنة. لازم تبين للحكومة اللي أنت هتعيش في البلد هنا لمدة علشان يقدموا لك على يوقفوا على TPS اللي أنت قدمته ليه. آخر حاجة، الناس اللي قدموا على TPS أول مرة ممكن يقدموا تاني مرة. يعني لو أنتوا قدمتوا من سنين وجالكوا ممكن تقدموا تاني مرة. والآن لو أول مرة تقدموا على TPS ما فيش مشكلة، ممكن تقدموا على أول مرة. So in terms of eligibility for TPS, you must be a Yemeni national. You must be an individual that was born in Yemen and who has resided in the United States since July 5th, 2021. What this means to say is that you cannot be a Yemeni national that traveled from Yemen to the US and got into the country a week ago. If you have not been here since July 5th, 2021, you are not eligible to apply for TPS as of now. In addition to this, you must prove that you plan to continuously physically live in the United States until past the point of September 4th, 2021. You cannot apply for TPS, get granted the status, and then, try and travel for 8 to 9 months shortly after. If you applied for TPS a while ago, the first time that it was designated for Yemen, you are able to reapply currently if you would like to. If you are a first-time applicant, that's all right too. Currently, they're accepting those who want to renew their TPS status, as well as those who are first-time applicants.
Yasmin, I wanted to just make one point about the last slide that you were covering in terms of physically lived in the United States. So one thing that's important to mention is that, you have to establish by evidence how you're living in the United States. So you can't just say, well, I've been here for a year. Well, show us all the documents that establish that you are here or you've been here and that you've continuously been here. So if you show a lot of travel in your history on your passport and you've moved around a lot, they could call into question later that, was it really your intention to physically live in the United States or stay in the United States continuously during that time period? So that's important to consider. So if you do come to us and you've done a lot of travel and you've done a lot of moving around, make sure you have all the documentation for that.
أهم شيء لو أنتوا عايزين تقدموا على TPS أو عايز تجددوا TPS بتاعتكم، لازم تبينوا إن أنتوا هتعيشوا في البلد لمدة بعد ما يجيلكوا TPS. بعد ما الحكومة يوافق على TPS بتاعتكم لازم تجيبوا أوراق لينا احنا جمعية يعمل عشان احنا هنساعدكم تقدموا، لازم اوراق اللي بيبين اللي انت هتعيشوا في البلد. يعني ما ينفعش تقدم وما تبينش اللي انت هتعيش في البلد لمدة بعد ما يجيلكوا التي بي اس. مين ما ينفعش تقدم للتي بي اس؟ مين ما ينفعش يقدم للتي بي اس؟ اول حاجة لو شخص عمل جريمة كبيرة قوي والبوليس مثلا حطوه في السجن، يعني هيبقى في مشاكل لو انت عايز تقدم للتي بي اس. مش كل شخص اللي عامل جريمة ممنوع يقدم على التي بي اس، حسب النوع الجريمة. فلو لو انتم عندكم تاريخ مع البوليس او مثلا رحتوا للسجن، مش هيمنعكم علشان تقدموا على التي بي اس 100%، حسب النوع الجريمة اللي انت عملته. مثلا لو شخص سرق حاجة وعايز والحكومة حطه في السجن لمدة يوم، حسب يعني ممكن الشخص ده ممكن يقدم على تي بي اس. بس لو في حد مثلا موت شخص، هيبقى في مشكلة لو هو عايز يقدم على تي بي اس. وتاني حاجة، لو شخص عامل جريمة في بلاد تانية برا أمريكا، المشكلة بالتي بي اس ما بتقدمه، الحكومة بترسل التاريخ بتاعتكم كلكم. فلو عملت أي أنواع من الجريمة برا أمريكا، الحكومة عايزين يعرفوا كده، وعايزين يعرفوا السبب اللي أنت عملت الجريمة ده، وعايزين يعرفوا التاريخ بتاعت الجريمة. So in terms of eligibility and those who are not eligible to apply for TPS, if you've been convicted of any felony or 2 or more misdemeanors in the US and or overseas, or if you've been arrested in the US or overseas, this could complicate your attempts to apply for TPS. The application, the status itself is not necessarily like individuals won't be prevented from applying if they have a criminal history, but it would make the case a lot more complicated depending on the type of crime committed, the decision of a court and or judge, and all those details.
So one thing I want to just mention about that last section about criminal history, Yasmin, if we can just put it back up there. If you have been arrested in the United States or overseas, and you come to us to assist with your application, you must bring us all of the records from how you were arrested to what was the outcome of the arrest, meaning was the case dismissed or did they find you guilty, or any other alternate sentencing that might have happened as a result of the arrest. Sometimes you may get arrested, you get charged, you go to court, you do community service, and then they say, okay, stay out of trouble for 1 year and your case gets dismissed. So, very important, if you have an arrest, make sure you get all of the documentation for it from your criminal defense lawyer, or wherever you went to court for it. And if the case is still ongoing, then you want to try to resolve that case before you do reapply, or if you're looking to apply for the first time, you want to make sure that gets resolved. Criminal cases are serious anytime they come across with immigration, especially for people who don't have green card status or citizenship, because you could come into the crosshairs of ICE, where they could come looking for you and arrest you for having committed a crime, especially if it's a serious crime. And ICE is very particular about certain types of crimes that you may not think are serious, or people may not think are serious, but they can be very serious, such as like domestic violence cases. From my experience, even if it's a misdemeanor assault, ICE may come and arrest you and put you into a removal proceeding for something like that. So that's just something very, very important to consider, to make sure you have a clean record, or that you get all your documentation if you were arrested.
فأهم حاجة لو أنتم عندكم تاريخ مع البوليس أو مثلا يعني عندكم أي مشكلة لها علاقة انت دخلت للسجن، لازم تجمع كل الأوراق بتاعتك اللي بيبين السبب اللي انت رحت للسجن، ومثلا انت رحت الحكومة أو أي شيء زي كده. لازم تجمع كل الأوراق وتقدمه للحكومة. لازم يعرفوا التفاصيل علشان يعرفوا يعني ليش انت عملت الجريمة والسبب. يعني احنا في جمعية ياما لو انت جبت كل الأوراق ممكن نساعدكم بكل شيء له علاقة بكده. وكمان لو عندكم تاريخ مع البوليس ممكن يعني نحاول نساعدكم عشان تقدموا على TPS. So we have a question from the audience. This question is asking, let's see. So is it possible for someone who had TPS in 2015 and wants to travel, can they apply for a travel permit? Which is a good question that we plan to cover down the line in the webinar. السؤال عن لو الشخص عنده TPS وكان عنده TPS في 2015، هل هو ممكن يقدم على تصريحة أو ورق علشان يسافر برا البلد أمريكا؟ احنا هنحكي على الأوراق علشان تسافر لو جالك TPS في 5 دقايق كده في وسط البرزنتيشن.
Right. So if you had TPS and you got it under the Obama administration towards the end, whether 15, 16, whenever your case was approved, it is possible to travel. You can do what we're going to cover later. It's called Form I-131. It's a travel document that allows you to go outside of the US and travel back into the US. So yes, you can do that. It's an application for a travel document. We can file that along with the TPS application, whether it's for the first time or if it's a re-designation. Do you want to translate?
Yeah, there's a lot of questions coming in. Let's see. Okay, yeah, people are okay. So, let's see. Sorry, my screen is a little frozen. فلو انتوا قدمتوا على TPS ايش ممكن تعملوا؟ اول شيء لو كله تمام بكل الطلب اللي احنا بنقدمه والاوراق بتاعتكم، ممكن الشخص اللي يجي له TPS ممكن يسافر برا البلد أمريكا وممكن يرجع تاني. حسب بقى الوقت اللي انتم ممكن تسافروا فيه، حسب اللي الحكومة توافق عليه. مثلا ممكن شخص يقدم على أوراق علشان يسافر برا البلد ويقول أنا عايز أسافر أزور مصر لمدة شهر، ممكن الحكومة تقول لا أنا عايزكم بس تسافر أسبوع بس وترجع تاني. فحسب اللي الحكومة بيوافق عليه. بس ممكن الشخص اللي عنده TPS ممكن يقدم على أوراق علشان يسافر. تاني حاجة اللي بيقدم على TPS كمان أيضا جمعية ياما بيقدم له معاه طلب علشان يقدم على كارت العمل. الكارت العمل بيخليك تشتغل في البلد هنا، وممكن لو انت جالك الكارت العمل ممكن كمان يجي لك كارت سوشيال سيكيورتي. فده شيء مهم قوي. الرقم السوشيال سيكيورتي ده مهم قوي بالنسبة لي في أمريكا. فلو في أحد عايز يقدم على TPS ممكن يقدم على TPS، وممكن يقدم على طلب الكارت العمل، أو أيضا كمان ممكن يقدم على أوراق علشان يسافر. آخر حاجة للشيء مهمة قوي، الشخص اللي بيقدم على TPS والحكومة اللي وافقوا عليه ممكن ممكن بيحميهم من الحكومة علشان الحكومة ما ينفعش يمشيهم من البلد. لو الشخص مثلا دخل أمريكا والفيزا بتاعته هينتهي في أسبوع وقدم على TPS والحكومة وافقت على TPS، والحكومة وافقت على TPS، الحكومة ما ينفعش يمشي البلد ده عشان TPS بيحميه لمدة 18 شهر. بس لو الشخص ده الحكومة وافقت على TPS بتاعته وبعد أسبوع عمل جريمة ودخل السجن مثلا، ده بقى مشكلة تانية، وممكن الحكومة ياخدوا اللي وقفوا عليه للTPS الشخص ده، ممكن ياخدوه منه وممكن يمشوه من البلد. بس في العادي للشخص اللي ما بيعملش أي أنواع من الجريمة ما ينفعش الحكومة يمشوه لمدة 18 شهر علشان محميه. So in terms of what TPS does for those who apply and are granted the status, there are three very important things that can occur with being granted the status. For starters, your individuals that have TPS status are able to travel abroad and return to the United States legally. This is the I-131, as Attorney Muhammad Salim mentioned. This application is for advanced parole, which is basically a travel document. Now, in terms of whether individuals can travel for a week, a month, or 2 months, it all depends on the reason as to why you want to travel, how long you like to travel, and what the government agrees on. So, you cannot apply to travel for 3 years and come back into the United States. Because it wouldn't work with the status. The second aspect that TPS allows for individuals is that they're allowed to work in the United States. You can get yourself a work permit and you can legally work in the country. Alongside getting a work permit, you can also get a social security number. And this number is very important and will also allow for you to apply for other things in the country. The last important thing that TPS allows for is that it allows for a temporary stay of deportation to be placed on those who are granted the status. What this means to say is that the government cannot deport you for no reason for up to 18 months if you have no status. Now, this does not mean to say that if you are granted TPS status and commit a crime and are charged in criminal court, that the government won't take back the status from you and potentially deport you. But what it does mean to say is that if you are granted the status, you are technically protected for up to 18 months.
So one thing I want to add that's important for all of these benefits is that many people think, okay, I'm going to apply for TPS on the application and I'm going to automatically get a social, a work permit, and advanced parole. If you're doing this application yourself, you have to understand that there's multiple forms that need to be completed. So the TPS application is typically known by the form when you fill it out. It's for the I-821, and that's the application just to get that protected status so that the government doesn't come and remove you. But you have to make sure that in rushing to file all of this, you don't forget to file the 765 form, which is the work permit, and then also the 131, which is the travel document, to allow you to travel outside of the US. So we've seen situations before where people just, filed one form and they forgot to file the 2 other forms that should go with it, and they realized their mistake after the fact. So you have to be very careful if you're doing this yourself and you're not working with legal professionals to make sure you do submit all of the forms, all of the necessary documents that are required with it, as well as, photographs as well. So we won't cover the details, but, don't think that just by applying for TPS on one form, you will get the benefits for the other 2 things. And as Yasmin was saying, you can ask the government, say, I'd like to travel for, 6 months to, let's say, Egypt or Canada or wherever you want to go. But don't think that the government will give you 6 months to.
Sorry about that.
That's all.
زي ما قلنا، يعني لو شخص قدم على TPS كل حاجة الكارت العمل والأوراق علشان نسافر مش بيجي في يوم، يعني لازم تقدم على يعني كل شيء عنده نوع من الطلب. TPS عنده I-821 ده طلب واحد، الكارت العامل عنده I-765 ده طلب تاني، I-131 هو ده بتاعت السفر. وفي آخر حاجة اللي جمعية يعمل بيساعد الناس يقدموا عليه اسمه الفي ويفر علشان يخلي تمن كل الطلاب ده أقل أو صفر. فلو انتوا عايزين تقدموا على TPS كلموني أنا هحط رقم تليفوني في الآخر. بس في كذا شيء لازم تقدموا عليه، ما لو قدمت على TPS لوحده مش هيجي لك كل الحاجات التانيين. فلو انت قدمت على TPS TPS مش هيخليك على طول يجيلك الجنسية. يعني ما ينفعش تقدم على TPS وبعد كده تقدم على الجنسية. لازم حاجات كتيرة ما بين TPS والجنسية تقدم عليه. كمان لو قدمت على TPS ما ينفعش على طول تقدم على كارت الجرين كارد. ولو عندك مشكلة بالبوليس أو عندك تاريخ بالبوليس أو دخلت السجن قبل كده، لو قدمت على TPS مش بيمسح التاريخ بتاعتك. ده TPS ملوش دعوة أو ليه علاقة مع تاريخك مع البوليس. آخر حاجة، لو الحكومة قال إحنا عايزين نمشيك من البلد، لو أنت رحت المحكمة ووقفت قدام قاضي وهم قالوا لك إحنا هنمشيك بالبلد بعد أسبوع، لو قدمت على TPS مش هي أحيانا مش هيمنعك علشان يمشوك، مش هيمنعوا الأمريكا علشان يمشوك من البلد. فأحيانا يعني أحسن حاجة للشخص اللي ما عندوش مشكلة بالبوليس أو تاريخ مع البوليس أو أي شيء زي كده هي ممكن يقدم على TPS. لو عندك مشاكل بالبوليس وكل شيء بيصعب الموضوع شوية. So in terms of what TPS does not do, it does not create a direct path to apply for citizenship. If granted TPS status, you cannot apply directly for citizenship right after. The same applies from TPS to a green card. You also cannot directly apply for a green card once you are granted TPS status. It also does not erase your criminal history. If you have an arrest history in the United States or in other countries, if you are granted TPS status, it does not erase that history. Your criminal history is a completely separate entity than your immigration case and or history. The last point that's a very important point to know, it does not counteract a deportation order. So if a court or a judge has deemed that you are to be deported for whatever reason and you are to leave the country within a week, applying to TPS, it cannot be guaranteed that applying for TPS will counteract this deportation order, especially if it's a final order made by a judge.
I want to say one thing about the last point. A lot of the clients that come to me or to YAMA, they may have another case, immigration case, while they're applying for TPS. For many Yemenis, they may have applied for asylum. So I want to note that, TPS does not mean, well, now you don't have to continue your asylum case. That's clearly not the situation. TPS is standalone. I don't advise anybody to make any independent decision about their asylum case or any other case they may have for a green card or any other type of immigration benefit just because they have TPS. TPS can complement and supplement whatever benefits you may be getting, but it shouldn't be, it shouldn't take away from whatever else you're pursuing, because with asylum, you can get a green card in America eventually if you prevail on your case. But with TPS, you can't. So I just want to make a note that many people who have other types of immigration benefits or cases that are pending, you know, shouldn't confuse the benefit they're getting from TPS and think that that benefit, you know, supersedes or, you know, is better than another benefit they may be getting. So it's important, if you have another case going on, to consult with your lawyer about that other case, because we will only, if you come to us, we will only primarily advise you related to the TPS situation for you.
فلو الآن أنت عندك محامي شغال معاه والمحامي بيساعدك بأي شيء له علاقة بمثلا المشكلة عندك بالبوليس، لازم تكلم المحامي ده، أكد معاه على كل شيء له علاقة بالكيس بتاعتك. إحنا كجمعية ياما ممكن نساعدك بأي شيء له علاقة بالتي بي اس أو الجنسية أو الجرين كارد وحاجات زي كده. بس لو انتم جيتوا عند المكتبة بتاعتنا وعايزين مساعدة بحاجة ليها علاقة بالحكومة أو البوليس أو أي شيء زي كده، إحنا لا نعرف نساعدكم. لازم يعني شيء ليه علاقة بالهجرة، ولازم تأكدوا مع المحامي بتاعتكم لو عندكم أحد بيساعدكم بأي شيء ليه علاقة بالبوليس أو بالسجن السجن اللي انتوا دخلتوه. In terms of TPS deadlines, so TPS was extended until March 3rd, 2023. If that year is surprising or shocking to you, it should be, because it's an amazing thing. You know, TPS being extended as long as it has allows for many initial individuals who want to initially register, giving them a chance to apply until 2023. So the main thing to know is, if you have had TPS in the past and you were granted a status and you want to reapply, you only have until September 7th, 2021 to submit your application. With YAMA, you only have until September 2nd to submit your documents and your application. But with the government, with USCIS, you can only submit your application and documents and such until September 7th if you are re-registering. Now, if you're a first-time applicant and you've never applied previously and you were never granted the status, you have until March 3rd, 2023 to apply. So you have plenty of time to apply. You know, if you have a visa that's set to expire in a few months, I'd highly consider applying for TPS, because it is a form of protection up to 18 months. What's important to note is that you must physically be present in the US, like we said earlier, after you apply for the status and are granted it. You must be physically present past the point of September 4th, 2021, and you must have documentation showcasing that you will be present in the country. Like I said earlier on in the presentation, you cannot apply for TPS and then try to travel for 2 years after. Not only will your status expire, but it does not show USCIS that you truly need to be in the country temporarily. You also must be a continuous resident in the country since July 5th, 2021. So you have to prove that you were living in the United States as a resident from July 5th, 2021. زي ما قلنا في حاجتين أهم حاجة لازم نعرفه. أي شخص اللي قدم على التي بي اس قبل كده من سنين والحكومة اللي وقفوا على التي بي اس ليهم، ممكن يقدموا تاني للتي بي اس لغاية الشهر الجاي يوم 7 2021. اللي زي ما قلنا لو انت قدمته قبل كده ممكن تقدمه تاني على التي بي اس شهر 9 يوم 7 2021. وبالنسبة لجمعية ياما، انتوا ممكن تقدموا معانا لغاية شهر 9 يوم 2 2021. بالنسبة للناس اللي أبداً قدموا على التي بي اس وهذا أول مرة تقدموا عليها، عندكم لغاية شهر مارس يوم 3 2023. فلو انتم اول مره تقدموا عليه وما قدمتوش قبل كده والحكومه ابدا وقفت على التي بي اس بتاعتكم، ممكن تقدموا لغايه سنه 2023. لازم تبين الحكومه اللي انتم كنتوا عايشين في البلد من شهر جولاي يوم 5 2021. وانا لو عندكم اي اسئله عن ازاي تبينوا ان انتم كنتوا عايشين في البلد من ساعه الوقت ده، هديكم رقم تليفوني في الاخر وتكلموني واساعدكم. وايضا كمان لازم تبينوا اللي انتم لازم تبينوا من اللي انتم هتعيشوا في البلد بعد شهر 9 يوم 4 2021. زي ما قلنا الحكومة مش عايزين يدوا التي بي اس للناس اللي هيمشوا من البلد بعديها. مثلا لو شخص قدم على التي بي اس وجاله التي بي اس وجاله ورق علشان يسافر برا البلد ويرجع، ما ينفعش الشخص ده يسافر لمدة 10 شهور وهيبقى عايز يرجع تاني البلد. ده هيبقى صعب أو مش هيبقى سهل علشان يدخل تاني.
I want to make a point that the deadline, the reason why somebody may think about the deadline being so short for re-registration from July to September is because many of the people who got TPS initially, it should be very easy for them to reapply. You know, if you come to us and you had TPS already, you know, what we need from you is just your old application for TPS, the work permit, and maybe you also applied for advanced parole or travel document as well. So that's why the time period for that is only from July till September 7. It's a very narrow time period. And the other good news, I want to make a note of this for Yemen is that nationals from Yemen can now apply online. They don't have to submit a paper application. If you're comfortable using a computer technology and you know how to scan your documents, upload them, you can apply online. And that is something that is a benefit for only 5 of the countries from TPS that are designated have that ability, and Yemen is one of them. So that's really good news for people in case they're running tight on the deadline. But I tell everyone that don't wait until September 6th to mail your application, because what if you forgot to pay the filing fee, or you know there was a delay or something else and it didn't get stamped until you know a couple of days later, and you don't want to miss that deadline of September 7th, because there's no point in doing the re-registration on September 10th when you miss the deadline, because unfortunately, you know, they won't accept it at all, or, you know, and then you'll have lost some benefits. For initial registration, the period is much longer because my theory on this is that they understand people may have a hard time coming up with documentation if they just came here, let's say, you know, in March or February, maybe they haven't thought about establishing their residence. So, you know, you need to make sure that you have all the documents to show that you've been continuously in the US since that July period. So, you know, you have a little bit more time to get your documents, and it's better to get your documents and make the case stronger as opposed to just filing it and not having anything, and then, you know, them making a request for more evidence later on.
فحاجة جديدة حصل مع ال TPS الآن ممكن تقدم على النت. فلو أنت شخص اللي كويس مع التليفون أو الكمبيوتر وممكن تصور كل أوراقك، ممكن تقدم ال TPS الطلب بتاعتك على النت لو تريده. تمام. بس زي ما قلت أنا ممكن أساعدكم بكل شيء له علاقة بال TPS والطلب، وأنا ممكن أصور كل الأوراق بتاعتكم. بس ده حاجة جديدة للناس اللي يحبوا يقدموا على النت لوحديهم. تاني شيء اللي مهم قوي، لو هتقدموا على TPS رأينا ما تقدموش على TPS في الآخر لحظة. يعني ما تروحوش على الطلب شهر 9 يوم 6 الساعة 10 بالليل 10 بالليل وعايزين تقدموا. المشكلة بكده علشان لو انت قدمت حاجة شيء غلط مثلا او اي شيء يعني هيبقى صعب شوية. يعني اهم حاجة تحاول تجمع كل اوراقك قبل الوقت الوقت اللي بينتهي فيها، وتحاول تقدم بدري. يعني حاول يعني على الأقل تقدم أسبوع قبل شهر. لو أنت أول مرة تقدم حاول تقدمه يعني وقت مدة طويل قبل الآخر يوم اللي ممكن تقدموا فيها. ولو الآن ده تاني مرة عايز تقدم لل TPS، حاولوا تقدموا على الأقل مثلا أسبوع قبل شهر 9 يوم 7 2021. Is it changing? There we go. ف احنا الآن عايزين في جمعية يعمل عايزين نساعدكم علشان تقدموا على TPS. ففي كذا شيء ممكن تعمله علشان تقدم. أول حاجة معانا، أول شيء حطيت رقم تلفوني على الشاشة، وكمان هحط رقم تلفوني في الكومنتس. كلموني، اعملوا ميعاد معايا. الأول حاجة بعد ما تكلموني وأعمل ميعاد معاكم، هقول لكم كل الأوراق وكل الشيء اللي أنا عايزاه منكم علشان أساعدكم علشان تقدموا الطلب بتاعتكم. وتاني حاجة للميعاد بتاعتكم هخليكم تيجوا المكتبة في بروكلين نيويورك، وهخليكم تدوني كل الأوراق بتاعتكم علشان أصورها، هكمل الطلب بتاعتكم. واخر شيء تمضي اسمكم على كل طلب اللي انا كملتهم لكم، وبعد كده نبعته للحكومة. وكده انتوا قدمتوا على TPS وكارت العمل والاوراق علشان تسافروا، وكمان الورق اللي بيخلي ثمن الطلب اللي انا هقدم لكم اقل. فزي ما انا قلت يعني لو انتم عايزين مساعده TPS ومساعده عشان تقدموا على TPS، كلموني على الرقم اللي على الشاشه. والان انا بساعد اي شخص اللي عايز يقدم لاول مره او عايز يجدد TPS بتاعته لغايه لا، لو انا اسفه، لو في شخص عايز يقدم TPS واول مره، ممكن أساعده أي وقت قبل 2023. بس لو أنتم عايزين تجددوا TPS بتاعتكم، لازم تعملوا ميعاد معايا قبل شهر 9 يوم 3 2021 علشان يبقى عندنا وقت ناخد صور من كل أوراقكم ونقدمه للحكومة. شكرا اليوم لكل شخص اللي دخل معانا على الويبينار عن TPS. ولو أي شخص عايز مساعدة علشان يقدم، رقم تلفوني على الشاشة في العربي وبالإنجليزي. وأيضا كمان حطيت العنوان بتاع المكتب بتاعتنا في بروكلين نيويورك. شكرا لكل اللي دخل معانا.
Thank you. I'm happy to have joined everyone and just share this information that's really valuable for our Yemeni community members. This is a great opportunity, and something I've talked with the other members at YAMA is that every single Yemeni person here, should have, by virtue of this, as a result of this, every single Yemeni person in New York City, in America, should have some sort of protected status. There should be no Yemeni person who is undocumented, doesn't have a social, doesn't have a work permit, because this is a chance for us to help our community and get work permits, social security cards, and even, if possible, some sort of ability to travel and visit family overseas if they haven't seen them for a long period of time. And we're happy and here to help everyone, and we're excited to work with everyone over the next couple of months and maybe even longer on these TPS cases.
Thank you, Mohammed. Thank you all for joining us today. We hope to see you all tune in into our future immigration webinars. And just to reiterate, feel free to contact me at the phone number listed on the screen, and we can assist you with applying for TPS, getting a hold of a travel document, as well as a work permit. تاني شكرا لكل شخص اللي دخل معنا اليوم على ويبينار عن TPS. رقم تلفوني على الشاشة، ولو أنتم عايزين مساعدة علشان تجددوا أو تقدموا على TPS، وأيضا كمان يجيلكم كارت عمل وأوراق علشان تسافروا برا البلد، كلموني على الرقم هذا وحملكم معاد. شكرا. السلام عليكم.